All right, today we're jumping right into Matthew chapter 14 for a story that's all about power, guilt, and a seriously haunted conscience. I mean, this is a political thriller and a moral drama, all rolled into one, and it's a huge moment in the gospel story. Our story kicks off with these really chilling words from verse 2. They're spoken by a powerful ruler, Herod. He's hearing about all the miracles Jesus is performing, and his mind immediately leaps to this terrifying conclusion. He's not just interested, he is completely petrified. And his fear really sets up the central question for us. Why on earth would a king believe that a man he personally executed has come back from the dead? So, to really get to the bottom of Herod's paranoia, which we see laid out in verses 1 and 2, we first have to understand who this guy was and what exactly was weighing so heavily on his conscience. Now, first things first, this is not Herod the Great from the Christmas story. This is Herod Antipas. He was a tetrarch, which basically means he was a client ruler for Rome, governing about a quarter of a territory. And his turf? Galilee and Perea, the exact places where Jesus was doing his ministry. Herod's reaction here isn't coming from some deep religious belief. It's all psychological, and it's deeply superstitious. It taps right into this common Greco-Roman idea that the spirits of good people who were killed could come back with even greater power. He's so eaten up by guilt that his own mind is just inventing a supernatural reason for Jesus' fame. So, this brings us to the absolute heart of the story. To make any sense of Herod's fear, the narrative actually flashes back in time to show us the dark secret that's plaguing him. What exactly did he do to John? You know, the conflict didn't start over politics or religion. As verse 3 explains, it all began with a major family scandal, a marriage that just completely shattered both moral and religious laws. And let me tell you, these family relationships were messy. Herod Antipas decides he wants Herodias. Now, Herodias wasn't just his sister-in-law, married to his half-brother Philip, she was also his niece. Yeah. Antipas convinces her to leave Philip and marry him instead, and this whole move was just driven by pure ambition and desire. This wasn't just some social taboo, it was a direct, flat-out violation of Jewish law. Leviticus is crystal clear: you do not marry your brother's wife. By doing this while Philip was still alive, Herod was openly defying the sacred law of the very people he was supposed to be ruling. But in a court full of people who were way too afraid to speak up, one voice decided to rise up in condemnation. And this, right here, is where John the Baptist enters the story. And John did not mince words. Verse 4 tells us he confronted Herod directly with this incredibly powerful and, frankly, dangerous truth. And for this public rebuke, Herod had John arrested and thrown in the fortress of Machaerus. And this is where Herod got trapped. Verse 5 explains his dilemma perfectly. He wanted John dead, and you can bet the furious Herodias was pushing for it. But he was also a politician, and he knew that the people saw John as a true prophet. Executing him could start a massive uprising. So John just stays in prison, a constant living reminder of Herod's guilt. So this stalemate, it finally gets broken during a moment of total indulgence and celebration. Verse 6 sets the scene. It's Herod's birthday feast, a huge, lavish banquet that's about to become the stage for a tragedy. In a move that was almost certainly cooked up by her ambitious mother, Herodias, her young daughter gets up and performs a dance for Herod and all his powerful guests. And the performance just captivates the king, whose judgment is probably pretty clouded by wine and a foolish desire to impress his court. So in his delight, as verse 7 tells us, Herod makes this incredibly foolish and rash promise, and he seals it with a public oath. The girl, who'd clearly been instructed by her mother, sees her chance. Herodias has been waiting for this exact moment. And the demand in verse 8 is not for jewels or land or half his kingdom. It is a cold, brutal, and very public request for the head of the prophet on a platter, or a charger, as it was called. Herodias has literally weaponized her own daughter to get her revenge, turning a king's birthday party into an execution order. And just like that, the trap is sprung. Herod, the man who was so afraid of the crowds, is now trapped by something else entirely, his own pride. You know, verse 9 tells us the king was sorry. That conscience we saw at the very start of our story was still nagging him even then. But his public image was just more important. To back down now in front of his entire court would be an unbearable sign of weakness. So, for the sake of his oath and his guests, he gives the horrific command.
And the method of execution, which we see carried out in verse 10, is really revealing. Beheading was a Roman practice, not a Jewish one. It's a small detail, but it shows just how much Herod's court was operating under the influence of Rome, totally detached from the very laws John the Baptist died defending.
The grim deed is done. The first part of verse 12 describes the somber aftermath. In an act of just profound loyalty and courage, John's disciples come forward, they claim his body, and they give their master a proper burial, a final act of honor in the face of tyranny. And with that, the flashback ends. The disciples do the only thing left to do. They go and tell Jesus. This simple, powerful sentence closes the loop on the whole story. It explains Herod's haunted conscience. It ends the ministry of the man who prepared the way, and it delivers the tragic news directly to Jesus. And it leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What's the real cost of compromising our conscience for the sake of our public image?